Connect with us online at sky995fm.com. Sky995fm.com.
Coming up on 11 minutes after 7 o'clock as we settle inside hour number 2 of the Breakfast Roundtable for today, Friday, the 9th of September, 2016. And we're putting our attention on some of the information that came out of yesterday's post-cabinet media briefing with Prime Minister Dr. Keith Rowley, who commented on the Las Alturas report, which was given to the President earlier this week. And also the President sent a copy to the Prime Minister. The report will be laid in Parliament later on today when Parliament sittings resume. The Prime Minister also commenting on inquiries in general, not just commissions of inquiry, but also the issue of inquiries by the Integrity Commission, saying that all these inquiries take too long, and even broadened his discussion to say that our justice system, there are too many failures in the system. On the line with us, Senior Attorney at Law Martin George, also a member of the Police Service Commission. Good morning to you, Martin George.
Morning, Martin.
Yes, hi. Good morning to you, Jessie, and good morning to your panel, and good morning, Trinidad and Tobago. I was not immediately aware of what had been transpiring, as I'm not in the country, but I think Jessie tried to bring me up to speed with
yes.
the latest development.
Yeah, but, Martin George, I'm just listening to what the Prime Minister would have had to say on these matters. And it is significant that a Prime Minister could make a comment like, our institutions are breaking down and failing. We need to do something about this. There is a miscarriage of justice, whether you are sitting in remand yard or whether you are a politician and allegations are made against you, and it is taking forever for the inquiry to come to some sort of conclusion or to even get started into those allegations. That is significant, isn't it?
Okay, yes, but Jessie, I think there are two different issues at play there. First of all, there was the Las Alturas inquiry, which was a commission of inquiry, and I think, if I understood the Prime Minister correctly, those last statements you just mentioned there were more directed towards the Integrity Commission.
Yes.
And I think he would have made a particular reference to investigations concerning the former housing minister, Mrs. Marlene MacDonald.
Yes.
So I think that's where he's directing that last comment to. And there must be some level of merit in that type of comment. And of course, Dr. Rowley would have a particular concern and anxiety with the Integrity Commission because of the history of what has occurred between himself personally and the Integrity Commission. In fact, the entire commission collapsed and had to resign as a result of a botched inquiry into allegations against Dr. Rowley himself. So I think he really personally has little confidence in the way they have operated over the years, and I think he also made the point in relation to the question of confidence in the current commission because of what transpired, if you recall, when the vice chairman, former Justice Sebastian Ventor, when he tendered his resignation, and then there was another member who also left at the same time over the report that came out concerning the issue of whether the investigation into the email scandal had been concluded or not. And there was a sharp dichotomy within the commission itself, clearly, in terms of the views of some members as opposed to others. And, of course, the chairman, at the time, he indicated, a view which it appeared that Justice Ventor was not comfortable with, and as a matter of principle, he resigned. And as I said, another member also left. So there really is a question of a crisis of confidence in our institutions. And I think in that sense, the Prime Minister is correct. It may partly be the doing of the politicians, but the reality is that we really do have a broken model and a broken system.
So, Mr. George, morning. Is there any way that a government who is setting up a commission of inquiry can give a timeline? Is it the chairman of the commission itself who would say, well, we can go on and on. We have got to get foreigners. We've got to get Queen's Counsel and that kind of thing. So it could go on forever. So who determines when a commission comes to a close?
Well, the thing is, remember, under the Commissions of Inquiry Act, the chairman of the commission has very wide powers in terms of determining the procedure that is adopted. So it's a question of, I guess, a matter of your discretion in the sense that the public interest must dictate that you would try to bring a commission of inquiry to a reasonably speedy close. But if you recall, say, for instance, in the Anthony Coleman Commission of Inquiry, one of the complaints he made was the lack of cooperation, preparation, and assistance even from the attorneys assigned to the commission.
Yes.
He in fact, he named attorneys in particular, and, he indicated that, those attorneys did not come up to par in terms of what they were supposed to do. So you see, as even with the best will in the world, your efforts can be frustrated and stymied, even if you're trying to move the matter forward at a reasonable pace. And then, of course, the absence of witnesses or persons not cooperating, and then you have to now issue summonses. So all those things can help to delay a commission of inquiry.
So what happens when they... What happens when...
It wasn't that, delayed. Sorry, go ahead.
The things I was wondering, because I know with Sir Anthony Coleman and so on, and even the attempted coup, there will be breaks sometimes of about 6 weeks to 2 months when nothing was happening. People went back to their homeland and so on, and then they came back to resume. What's happening in those interims?
Well, the thing is, one would assume that the commission members themselves may be perusing documents, perusing papers, or they may be awaiting the submission of either arguments from attorneys or further documents or further elements of evidence. So it's not necessarily that when the commission isn't actually sitting that no work is being done. We have to understand that, particularly once you talk in legal work, most of your legal work is done outside of the public view, outside of the glare of public scrutiny. It's when you are sitting quietly in your chambers or in your offices, you're perusing the volumes of documents and papers. That's when you do a lot of your work. So we need to be balanced and fair in our commenting in terms of that. However, there still are, I agree with you, long unexplained gaps in many of these inquiries, which really just keep totting up a ridiculous amount of money, and at the end of the day, you ask yourself, what has the country benefited? If we look at all the commissions of inquiry that we've had in Trinidad and Tobago, you'd probably realize that billions of dollars have been spent. Yes. And then when you do a cost-benefit analysis, you ask yourself, what have we really gotten as a result of this? And I think the Prime Minister yesterday was also making the point in terms of the cost-benefit analysis, because I think he made reference to the cost of the 2 towers that were under inquiry, and then he juxtaposed this against the ultimate cost of the inquiry. And, it really might be a case where the candle has cost more than the funeral.
I'm just looking at an excerpt from his statement yesterday before he started taking questions. And he made the point that if the People's Partnership Administration had done what they were supposed to do, there may not even have been a need for an inquiry. Quote, I told you the contract was awarded to build those 2 buildings, had to be demolished, was awarded in 2009. The cracks began to appear in sometime late 2009-2010. By that time, it became clear the buildings could not be salvaged and could not be used. The government had changed, and it was the duty of the new government and the board they appointed to go after the contractor before the 4-year period ended the statute of limitations. Because if you do not go after the contractor within the 4-year period, the contractor will now no longer be available to you to collect for what they did not perform properly. And
yes,
that is significant.
There is merit definitely in that argument which the Prime Minister has raised. And you see, the thing is, it's clear that in the past we've had scenarios where either political side has used their position of power once they're in government to really, pursue a politically vindictive agenda as opposed to a national uplifting or a nation-building agenda. And I think this, when one looks at it, you try to be fair to all sides, as I always, say. But the thing is, when you look at it and you weigh the options, you ask yourself, really, was this commission of inquiry the better option as opposed to going directly after the contractor for a flawed contract? And then to add insult to injury, you recall that same contractor was then granted even bigger contracts subsequently. So, you ask yourself, what then was really the objective? And I think those are valid questions that are being raised, and answers ought to be given to these.
What I found puzzling is that when the chairman of that commission of inquiry was presenting the report to the president, he was, and it was on television and radio, he was saying that, there are grounds for charges of criminal conduct to be laid, as the case might be. But the Prime Minister is saying the absolute opposite.
Well, the thing is, I would imagine that if it is the chairman of the Commission of Inquiry is saying that as a sound bite, then he ought to clearly be able to point to the evidence in his report that backs up such a position. So, I have not seen the report. I've just heard, some snippets from it. But if it is that he can point to that to back up that statement, then of course he would be in the clear. If he cannot, then it just appears to be maybe an unfortunate sensationalist statement. Because if after all of this time and all the evidence that you've gathered, if you don't have clearly something in your report which points to, making a case for that criminal action that you speak of, then you ought not, with the greatest of respect, to be speculating, on any such matter.
A lot of the lawyers who people these and perform at these commissions, do they set their own fees, or are there set fees for the kind of work they do?
Well, the thing is, there's a scale of fees which we as attorneys are supposed to be guided by. However, as you would realize with these commissions of inquiry, the first thing is that in many cases, and this applies to both sides of the political divide, the persons who would populate the benches as the attorneys or counsels would always be politically associated persons. Yes. And I say that, putting it in the nicest possible language, they are always politically associated persons. So in other words, if it is that you have, one party in government and they decide to institute a commission of inquiry, once there's any political element in it or they see the chance for political gain, they then handpick their lawyers, who we all know, and this is the reality in Trinidad and Tobago. We all know who the attorneys who are favored by one party are, and we all know who the attorneys favored by the other party are. It's no secret. So, it's time we start facing the reality and calling a spade in Trinidad and Tobago. It's no secret. It's the same names, the same faces we see all the time. When one party is in government, you see a certain group of lawyers coming to the fore. Mm-hmm. You can read out the list of names. Everybody knows. When the other side is in government, you see another list coming to the fore. And that's the reality. So, in other words, you have persons who basically all come to the table with a political agenda more than a legal agenda. And that's the fundamentally flawed basis upon which we then proceed to spend millions and possibly billions of dollars on a commission of inquiry. So it becomes a political gamesmanship rather than a legal and objective search for the truth.
Looking at culpability for blame and so on, I know that from what I've read of the geology of that place up in Mova, the Las Alturas, that it used to be an old quarry, which was abandoned after a while because I think they took out so much of the stuff there and so on. Yet the government allegedly and the contractor still went ahead and built these apartments there. And then a year or two later, they started to, wonderful apartments because I was there for the opening of the apartments and so on. A year or two later, they started to crack and they had to abandon 2 blocks. If you have gotten these geological reports saying that, this is what happened at this site for a long time and it is not possible really to build the kind of structures you want there, why should somebody go ahead in light of these of the documents and the documentation?
Well, I would think the culpability is twofold in the sense that, of course, yes, the contractor would have a responsibility, but then I would think that the agency hiring the contractor also has a responsibility because it couldn't be that these reports were kept secret from the managing agency, which I think at the time would have been the HDC. So therefore, you ask yourself, what happened? In other words, where did the ball fall? In terms of, I heard the Prime Minister say yesterday about 25 reports. He spoke of 25 reports that were done. So therefore, with all of that information, why then was it allowed to
go
continue?
ahead? Yes.
So I think we really have to ask some serious questions in that regard. So it may be that it's information that we really had all the time, and a commission of inquiry didn't necessarily unearth anything new in that regard. And I think that's a major part of the Prime Minister's beef in his statement yesterday. He said that it appeared to be an exercise in futility because you had all the information was present already, and we knew what had transpired. So therefore, he felt that the approach of a commission of inquiry was clearly wrong to take. But of course, he would be speaking also from his personal perspective and not just as Prime Minister.
We've got a caller who wants to join in. Hello, good morning. You're on the air.
Yes, sir. I'm Jesse Tsai again. Mr. George, good morning.
Hi, good morning to you, sir.
Mr. George,
you can't listen to your
Hello?
radio.
Hello?
We are listening to you. We're
All
waiting
right,
for
good.
you. Yes.
To avoid inordinate delay, what do you think Commission of Inquiries should do to reasonably expedite matters? Thank you.
Okay, well, the thing is, the first thing I think we ought to look at, it would have to be some kind of legislative change in terms of the way the Commission of Inquiry Act is structured. We would definitely need to make some changes and possibly put in some sort of timeline. Now, while it would be impossible to give, say, fixed timelines for, each Commission of Inquiry, you certainly have to put maybe time periods. You say, well, okay, look, between the appointment of the commission and its first sitting, no more than 21 days must elapse, that kind of thing. So you put those kind of milestone markers, so therefore you know that, look, you can keep them within a certain overall time frame. So in other words, how they then divide up their tasks within those, blocks of time, then that's up to them. But you need to do something like that. Otherwise, it becomes open-ended. I don't imagine that the framers of our legislation ever anticipated that you'd have a commission of inquiry stretching over 4 years and costing billions of dollars. It really is an absurdity. It's a palpable absurdity because, first of all, when you look at it, just to even go through all that documentation that has been produced, it really, it reduces the effect of the commission to de minimis, because what you end up doing is basically you're just building the lily over and over and over again, to the point where you don't even recognize that it was a lily to start with.
Yes.
And the whole purpose and objective is lost along the way, and you end up having a commission of inquiry for the sake of a commission of inquiry rather than for the purpose of getting to the truth of the matter.
Indeed.
If you look at how South Africa handled things with their Truth and Reconciliation Commission,
Oh, that was
they treated
beautiful.
it very differently. Very, very differently they treated it. And they were actually able to get some very clear and definitive guidelines coming out of that commission of inquiry. But we seem to be, experts at, spending a lot of time and a lot of money, saying a lot of things and achieving nothing.
We've got, that reminds me of Shakespeare, as you say that. Let's see who else is on the line. Good morning, you're on the air.
Hello, good morning to the panel.
Yes, go ahead.
I just want to say something here.
Go ahead.
I just want to say something, if you will.
Yes, we're waiting for you. Go ahead, please.
Dr. Rowley, from the inception of that Commission of Inquiry, he was quite right that it was wasting government funds.
Yes.
He was quite right because he knew exactly what would happen to that. He knew. So he was right, and all up to now he's still right.
Thank you so much, caller. Let's see who else is on the line. Good morning. Welcome. Hello. Hello, good morning. All right. We seem to not be able to make connection with that caller. Martin George, your final comment as we let you go.
Yeah, what I would like to say, Jessime, is that I think we really need to keep calling on our politicians to rise above the pettiness and the political inciting and, the negatives which have kept us down as a country and prevented us from achieving our true potential. I will forever continue to believe in Trinidad and Tobago and the potential of our people, but our politicians continue to be our greatest obstacle and impediment to development, growth, and success as a nation. And we need to train them, we need to call upon them to behave better, to behave more responsibly, and to always try to put the national interest above petty and narrow partisan political interests.
Thanks very much, Martin George, for chatting with us this morning. We've been speaking
Thank
with...
you.
Pleasure, Jessime, and your panel, and have a good morning.
Same to you. We've been speaking with the Senior Attorney at Law, Martin George, and he also is a member of the Police Service Commission here on the Breakfast Roundtable.
Don't touch a button. We'll be right back with more on Sky 99.5.